I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Graham Noble, Scott Cosenza, Tim Donner, and Joe Schaefer. And this is Liberty Nation's online news program. On today's episode, the coming Democrat apocalypse. Elections do have consequences, and no matter the uproar by the Democratic Party, the President and Senate are going full steam ahead on confirming a new Supreme Court justice. Petrified Dems and debates. With the presidential debates looming, word is that the Democratic strategists are petrified of the TV matchup. Breonna Taylor, facts and fury. The two don't seem to be matching up in the Kentucky case as the grand jury hands down indictments that don't seem to satisfy the mob. And our final segment, the conservative funnies. Sometimes you just gotta laugh, folks. All this and more in Liberty Nation's new program, The Conservative Five. The coming Democrat apocalypse. It appears there will be a new member of the U.S. Supreme Court. If not by Election Day, then certainly by Inauguration Day, despite threats from Democrats that they will rain down hell on the GOP if they forge ahead. But for once, it appears like the Republicans aren't backing down. Joe, I'm calling this segment The Coming Democratic Apocalypse because that's all the rhetoric regarding the Supreme Court. I mean, they say they want to pack the court, pack the Senate, blah, blah, blah. But the GOP is sort of acting like sticks and stones for once, and they aren't listening.
Well, I think they are listening, actually, and I think they're going to love what they're hearing. It's going to be music to their ears. It's a tropical storm right now gathering in the ocean, and Republicans just want it to turn into hurricane lunacy. The Democrats doing what they do, overreacting, over-emotional, turn it into a big circus. And Joe Biden doesn't want this. Joe Biden is running away from this. He's trying to pivot to the center. He's Scranton Joe the populist. He dissed the Bernie bros the other day, saying, I beat the socialists. He doesn't want to be pulled to this lunatic left that was on display in the primary process. So for Republicans, I mean, seems like a perfect setup. They've got the votes, and it's like, Democrats, get on stage and do what you do and alienate mainstream America. It seems like a winning formula for Republicans.
You know, it seems like the left pretty much realizes the seismic shift in the court that's going to happen when we get a new justice to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And think about it. A new justice to the court will establish a 6-3 conservative majority for as far as the eye can see. This nominee could be in place for 40 years. And compare that to losing to Donald Trump for the left, where they're only out of power in the White House for another 4 years. You could make an argument, and I think the left, the way they're fighting, is in their minds saying to themselves, 40 years from this justice is arguably even worse than 4 more years of Trump. That's how significant this appointment really is.
Well, it's only arguable, Tim, if you have the Trump derangement syndrome. It's definitely worse from a leftist policy perspective to have replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg with a pro-market type jurist. It's a death knell for them, and that's why they're fighting so hard.
You know, as I wrote a couple of days ago in Liberty Nation, I really believe from the bottom of my heart, if you like, that this will be the final straw for Democrats if Trump gets his next Supreme Court nominee, which I'm assuming that he was going to get that. And I think it's going to be the last straw. And I think the Democrats will look to stack or pack, whatever term you want to use, the Supreme Court. But of course, they need the political power to do that. And so it may be quite a while. After replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they're going to decide that the only way that they can get control of the ideological control of the court is to pack it at the first opportunity.
They have no one to blame but themselves, because the way they tried to torpedo Brett Kavanaugh in a fight that really they weren't going to win and wasn't that significant because it only moved a center right leaning court a little bit more to the right. Whereas this one, if they'd held their fire for this nomination, they might have something. But because of what they did to Kavanaugh, their shameful performance in the Kavanaugh confirmation proceedings, they lost 2 more seats in 2018. So that the Republicans went from 51 to 53 seats. And now with Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski saying they're not in favor of a vote, if the Republicans still only had 51, there would be no vote before the election. So that's the consequences of the Democrats' own action and writ large their refusal to accept the outcome of the 2016 election.
All right, but did anybody sense there was kind of a small shift when Romney said, I'm going to take a vote here, that the Democrats kind of went from whining loudly to, do I sense a little bit of resignation there?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you, Lisa. I think there's a little bit of a kind of a sigh of defeat there. I think they were counting on Romney. And I've heard rumors that also Senator Murkowski is also possibly wavering on this issue as well, and she might give in. And I'm not entirely sure that Susan Collins is going to hold out and stand against a Trump nominee either.
Well, I think it's possible that Collins is a solid, but I think you're right. I think Murkowski could change things. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I'm just saying it sounds like you all think Democrats may be reasonable here. And I'm saying they just can't control themselves. Logic doesn't come into play. Everything's the end of the world. Everything's democracy's dying, gloom and doom. And I don't think they can control themselves. I think they're going to do it.
I'm not sure that it's a case of them saying, oh, well, okay, we'll let this one go. I think they just realize that they really don't have anywhere to go on this issue.
What they really want is just to change the subject to some degree at this point for the very reasons that Joe just stated. They don't have the votes. It's all about the math, and the math doesn't work for them because once Mitt Romney, and how ironic is that Mitt Romney would deliver with his assent to holding a vote before the election, would deliver the majority that Trump needs to get this nominee through the high court. Mitt Romney, the most Trump-deranged member of the Republicans in the Senate.
Yeah, and Scott, what's the deal with the war on Catholics? I mean, speaking of the apocalypse, I mean, if you're Catholic, they're just ready to go after you, hammer and tong.
Sadly, Lisa, many Americans do not like the fact that the Supreme Court is populated by Catholics and Jews at levels that way outpace their position in society.
Yeah, well, my 2 cents is that the Democrats whine and loudly object, but they don't seem to understand that if they want to run the show, they need to win an election. I mean, when was the last time they held the Senate? It was, I think, 2014. Then they lost the presidency to Trump in 2016. That's not the GOP's fault. That's their problem. And in a republic, the one with the most votes holds the reins of power, period. All this frustration and vitriol from the left reminds me of the kid in the class who complains when he got an F on his math test and blames it on his teacher because he didn't bother to study.
If I could just say really quickly, because I think it's an important point, is that this is who they are. This is what gives them meaning and identity as a party, is rabidly opposing fascism, Trump, this right-wing extremism. That is everything they are. So how can they not do that with the cataclysmic event that is a Supreme Court justice? They have to do it because that is what they are.
They've created their own circumstances. They've created their own demise in this matter by the way they've handled the result of the 2016 election. They've become so deranged that they cannot see the forest from the trees, and so they react the way children react. They're saying that because Trump won when he shouldn't have, and because Ruth Bader Ginsburg died when she shouldn't have, then we're going to just change all the rules and tear down the system and pack the court and end the Senate filibuster and make Puerto Rico a state and all of this stuff. I mean, I can't believe that this kind of childish reaction is lost on the voters.
Tim, you have to put into the mix there that most of that, I think, if not, well, at least a lot of it is just for fundraising. So if you are a person who can fundraise off of woe betide us as the future of the Supreme Court, unless you write a check for abortion rights or reproductive freedom, whatever they call it, I'm sure the checks are rolling in like you cannot believe at all these places.
Yeah, they are. They've reported that.
Keeping that fever pitch up, is good for the bottom line.
Petrified Dems and debates. There was an interesting story in The Atlantic this week. Democrat insiders are at least at DEFCON 2, ready to deploy and engage, because they fear Joe Biden will just blow it. Here's a comment from the author of the Atlantic article, Edward Isaac Dovier. Quote, almost every Democratic operative I've spoken with in the past few weeks remains petrified that Biden is going to bungle the debates in a way that costs him the election, perhaps by looking old, confused, or confirming the worst paranoia and conspiracy theories about him being unfit for the job. Petrified Dems and the upcoming debate. So the Democrats are using the P word, petrified. Tim, do you think that they're on to something? I mean, are they right to be freaked out, or will Joe Biden be equal to the moment? What's your prediction?
I think they're right to be petrified, but the bar has been set so low for Joe Biden by the media wing of the Democratic Party that if Biden can simply avoid sniffing a woman's hair or falling asleep or saying he's in the wrong century, he'll be proclaimed the winner of the debates simply because he didn't melt down in front of hundreds of millions of people. If he's beaten in this debate, Biden, will he be beaten by meltdown moments, huge gaffes like saying 200 million died from COVID when he meant 200,000? Or will he be defeated by what I call a slow drip of dreariness, where he just projects such an old, fading image of a politician that the growing sense on the voters will be that this guy doesn't have much left in the tank? I think Trump is going to launch a full-scale attack and try to throw Biden completely off balance and get him confused and dazed.
I believe that no matter what Biden does in this debate, no matter how he handles himself, no matter how bad he looks, I think the press is going to come out overwhelmingly and say, Joe Biden crushed it, absolutely crushed it. I mean, this was a magnificent performance.
I just love what Tim said about it's not going to be a meteor exploding into a billion pieces. It's going to be a slow fizzle with this guy. Trump tweeted out today, and she said it before, that, it's low energy. Just what he said about Jeb Bush in 2015, low energy Jeb. He just said it, low energy Joe. He's going to be pushing that, and I don't think it's going to be the huge gaffe that kills Biden. It's just going to be the American people watching this guy having really nothing to offer of his own except for I'm not Donald Trump. And so I don't think it's going to be a train wreck. It's going to be a lot more dull than that.
Scott?
Well, I don't think that it's panic-inducing because I agree that it is going to be a very slow-moving train situation rather than a spectacular one. And therefore, there is no reason to panic because nobody was ever excited about voting for Joe Biden in the history of Joe Biden's electoral endeavors. But, they're riding high because they've been on a 3.5-year ad campaign run by the legacy media to tell people that Donald Trump is a horrible president. And if you spend $1 billion advertising Ivory soap, it's no wonder that people buy bar Ivory soap. So I expect they think that campaign is going to pay the dividends for him to win.
Well, I tell you what has me freaked out is that Trump says that he isn't preparing at all for the first debate.
Let me jump in, please, Lisa, if I might, because I was similarly surprised, shocked, as a matter of fact, when I read that, and I thought, oh boy, that seems crazy. And what it turns out is what he's not doing is having somebody play Joe Biden. He is preparing in a way of having briefing books and making sure that he's up on issues that may come up and attacks that may come and that he may then parry.
I don't think you should take anything for granted. I mean, he needs to nail this debate. And I worry he's banking on Biden being out of it, but you can't assume that. Biden has tons of debate experience and historically has done well. Now he may be shot, as Trump puts it, but the bar is already so low for Biden that if he lands one or two good punches, the media will immediately ring the bell for Biden and declare him the winner.
Well, nobody ever went broke overestimating the confidence of Donald Trump, and he's certainly exuding that here. I think the difference in debate prep is that Joe Biden has essentially shut down his campaign to save his energy and cram for the debates. I mean, you see Kamala Harris is the only one who's been out on the campaign trail over the last several days, whereas Trump is certainly doing debate prep, but like everything else with him, he's not doing it the way typical politicians do it, because he feels that the most important thing for him, as it was in 2016, was to get out among the people, go to the rallies, go to the events, as many as he can. He figures he won with it in 2016. He's going to do the same thing in 2020.
You want to get people motivated to get out and vote for Donald Trump, have Joe Biden do a completely lifeless debate performance, and then have the entire media celebrate him for it. And it's going to happen unless there is a huge gaffe. So them doing what they are already planning on doing, I think, is going to help Donald Trump so much more. They didn't learn this lesson in 2016, and they don't know it now. They think they can pull the wool over the American people's eyes, and it's just not going to happen.
And that's because they've never shown any curiosity about who these Trump voters were in 2016. They just write them off as a bunch of ignorant hicks who didn't know any better.
All right, predictions. Let's go around the horn, starting with you, Graham. Who wins the first debate?
I would say that I predict that Trump will win the debate in the eyes of most people. But of course, as we've all been just discussing, I think in the eyes of the way the media portrays it, there's no question Joe Biden wins the debate.
All right, Scott?
I was tempted to say, there will not be a debate, because that's sort of being in the air, that somehow that won't happen. But I'll say that it's a mixed result, Lisa. I'll say that both, Joe Biden got himself to be vice president of the United States of America for 2 terms and senator from Delaware for a lifetime. And that's no small thing. I'm sure lots of people wanted to have those jobs instead of him. So I don't want to underestimate his ability as a politician. I think there'll be some blows landed on both sides. Donald Trump certainly has many weaknesses that a puncher can hit on.
Joe?
What I think is the most important thing beyond the gaffes and the things that is Joe Biden has been in the game, the top levels of power, political power, for 47 years, nearly half a century, and he is running on "I'm not Donald Trump." That's all he has to offer after all that time in the game. I think that is really going to resonate with the American people. So it doesn't matter who that they declare him a victor. Is what is he going to offer the American people on that stage? He doesn't have anything to offer. That's going to come across clearly. It's not going to be a decisive thing, but the American people are not going to see a reason to vote for Joe Biden.
Tim?
Well, to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it depends what the meaning of winning is. Because if winning means that people generally perceive that you've won, that's one thing. If the media declares that the other guy won, that's quite another thing. But I think what people are looking for here, look, we're in extraordinary circumstances, this widespread civil unrest in the midst of a pandemic, and now a showdown over the very future and direction of the Supreme Court. I think people have a lot to process, such as Donald Trump's record versus his personality.
Answer who's going to win, Tim.
Well, I think Trump will get the better of it. I think he'll make the better impression, but it depends. People are looking for leadership in a time like this, and whichever candidate comes across as being the right man to provide leadership at an extraordinary time like this, leadership will be the winner.
All right, I'm going to pull a John McLaughlin and say Scott is correct. It will be a draw. Breonna Taylor, facts and fury. A Kentucky grand jury reviewed all the facts in the shooting of Breonna Taylor and indicted one former police officer on 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree. Officer Brett Hankinson was fired in June and now faces the possibility of up to 5 years in jail. But this doesn't seem to be enough to mollify the mob. Breonna Taylor, facts and fury. A Kentucky grand jury reviewed all the facts in the shooting of Breonna Taylor, and one officer was indicted, a former police officer, on 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree. Officer Brett Hankinson was fired in June and now faces the possibility of up to 5 years in jail. Let's deconstruct the sad story of Breonna Taylor and the facts and fury that has resulted in her death. Liberty Nation has been following this incident that occurred in Kentucky since it happened. Legal Affairs editor Scott Cosenza has written extensively on this incident. Scott, let's begin with the facts of the case. Who did what, when, and how? But first, I want you to answer. You spent a lot of time on that no-knock warrant. Were you surprised to hear that they actually did knock?
I was very surprised, Lisa. And so the reason why this is very important is because it has to do with the mindset of the people inside the residence. So let's go ahead and lay out the people, and then we'll get back to the knock status, okay? The people, in addition to Mr. Hankinson, the police officer who was charged, there are Officer Cosgrove and Officer Mattingly. Those 3 are members of the Louisville, Kentucky police department, and they raided Ms. Breonna Taylor's apartment shortly after midnight on March the 13th. Also in the apartment at the time, unbeknownst to police, was her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker. Mr. Walker was legally armed, and when the police tried to break down the door, he thought it was Ms. Taylor's other or previous boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover. Now, Mr. Glover, by all accounts, is actively involved in a criminal conspiracy to distribute narcotics. He's a drug dealer, and he's not a street-level guy. He's a little bit above that. And part of what Ms. Taylor did was hide money and handle money for him. She may have also handled drugs. We don't know yet for sure. And we also don't know yet if she did that simply because she was helping out a friend who was involved in this business, or if she may have profited as a participant in that conspiracy as well. What we do know is the raid happens. Mr. Walker starts firing at police and shot Officer Mattingly in the thigh. At that time, Cosgrove and Mattingly return fire, and they shoot up and kill Breonna Taylor. She was killed by a bullet from Cosgrove's gun. Officer Hankinson has been charged because he fired wildly. And as soon as the shooting started, he started shooting as well. And I think that that's a great charge against him because too often, part of the reimagining or reevaluation of the situation between the police and the public is, we've forgiven, I think, too many police shots that are fired wildly. And a police officer needs a good reason to fire every shot they do fire. And Hankinson had none. And so he was fired, and I think his prosecution is warranted.
I think it's unfortunate that the Attorney General of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, is being tagged as some sort of a, Oreo cookie because he's black and he's Republican, and he's defended the decision by saying, that the facts really matter in this case. But the facts don't matter anymore. I think that's what we're seeing in these riots in Louisville. It doesn't matter if a white cop shoots a black person. Those are the only facts that matter to the mob.
Well, no justice, no peace. I think, in this instance, that's what that means. If they don't get what they consider justice. Now, there's no argument from the other side. Black Lives Matter hasn't said this is why Cosgrove and Mattingly should be indicted with any kind of legal basis for it. They just want it to happen.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is just seems like they're up for mob rule.
I think the Black Lives Matter people and all these other activists supposedly protesting police brutality are more out for revenge than anything else, and I think that's sad. Personally, you know, the libertarian in me says that there shouldn't be no not warrants at all. I don't believe there should be any situation where the police can go busting into any residence or any building and not reasonably expect to be shot at. So I think no not warrants are a bad idea anyway. And of course, that's the root cause of this particular problem.
So it was initially reported that this was a no-knock warrant that was served on Ms. Taylor's apartment. And the reason for that is that the judge in the case initially did issue a no-knock warrant. But that warrant expired. Warrants expire. So if you're a police officer and you go to get a search warrant, you have to serve that within a limited time. It's stated on the warrant. It might be a week. It might be, whatever. So when they went and got another warrant, that one did not allow for the no-knock status. And so that was another reason why it was important. Again, part of the importance is, do the people inside think they're being assaulted by a rival drug gang, or do they understand that they're being raided by police officers? So that's why it becomes a vital question. But in this case, Graham, there is a civilian witness who was on the scene, another tenant in the building who heard police rap on the door and several times announced their presence. Now, I would say to you, Graham, even still, people shouldn't be expected at past midnight, to be able to jump up and let the police into their home at a moment's notice, right? We all, I think, might be in bed and not be able to respond in time. So,
but they have to have some way to get into the house. I mean, if they're knocking, I think that's reasonable.
Well, Lisa, they don't have to have some way to get into the house if they come in when the house is unoccupied, for instance. They could go in during the day. They know that Ms. Taylor works, for instance, right? So why not? I think part of the way that we can re-examine the way police interact with the public is, are there ways to de-escalate? And there are. You know, anytime police raid an occupied structure, you think if the police were at your door right now, even if they were mistakenly thought they had the legal right to be there, you would consider it a real violation. And I don't think you'd jump up and swing the door open as fast as you could. That's our natural reaction. So we can do things to minimize that by waiting until somebody leaves the house and pulling them over in a traffic stop. Wait
a minute. I'm just going to beg to differ with you guys. I mean, that doesn't work when you have, say, a pedophile in the house, or you have a child sexual assault going on. I mean, there are reasons for no knocks. I'm not saying they should be handed out like, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to a second grade. But I'm saying that they do have these for a reason.
Well, let me jump in. I say, each case is different, and what we all want really is look at the facts of the matter and make an adult decision as to, what really happened and what are the consequences. But when the left progressives, when they inject race into it, when they make it systemic racism, then we can't objectively look at the facts. I wrote an article, this is similar, it's different, but it is similar, about the mass incarceration push. So they want to get rid of bail. So in New York City, this guy he attacked a city bus, smashed in a couple windows, got out with no bail. What does he do when he gets out? He derails a subway train, seriously injures commuters. Minorities ride the subway too. So it's, injecting racism into it. It's I want to know, what did this guy do? He attacked the city bus for no reason with a metal barricade and smashed windows. To me, that's a malicious, hostile act. Do we really want him on the streets to commit another antisocial act that could have easily gotten people killed? And what does it matter what his race is? What did he do? And what was the situation? And that's, I think, in this situation, we just want to establish what the facts are. Let's leave the race out of it. Let's leave all that stuff out of it and just look at each situation for what it is. We're not allowed to do that.
Regarding these protests now in Louisville, and we've seen them all summer long and into the fall in Portland and Seattle and Chicago and Atlanta, everywhere else. Can we ever have protests or even riots over someone who was not engaged in criminal activity? I mean, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, even George Floyd, all had criminal backgrounds. How about the law-abiding Black citizens who get stopped for driving while Black over and over? We've heard all the stories. It seems a lot more compelling to protest over offenses against people who were discriminated against only because they were Black, instead of criminals who happen to be Black.
Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify the fact that, yeah, I was actually aware that in this particular case, the police did actually knock. I guess it's the, I have a thing for Not Warrants, and I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I was aware of the situation in that case. I do happen to agree with what Tim is saying there. Now, obviously, we can't take the point of view that just because somebody has a criminal past, that somehow anytime they get into an altercation with the police and they get shot, well, they had it coming because they were a criminal anyway. But nevertheless, I think Tim's is a kind of a relevant point. The crowd, the mob, they stir things up, and they always say the same thing. They always present the point of view that the individual involved in the shooting that they're mad about was somehow previously a wonderful, upstanding pillar of the community, never did anything wrong in their life, never even looked sideways at anybody, and so they're a complete victim. And yet, as Tim mentioned, there are actual genuine victims of unnecessary racial profiling, and those are the people that should be upset.
Agreed, but the mob doesn't seem to want to let the facts get in the way of its narrative. I actually heard a commentator on Fox yesterday try to make the case that Kentucky law is the problem here. Well, if you shoot a cop first, and the shooter says he did just that, he pulled out his gun, right? You can damn sure expect the cops to shoot back. I mean, one cop was injured by the gunman, and this is a problem. In most of these situations, the assailant is either resisting arrest, running away from the cops, reaching for a weapon. When you do that, you can expect bad things to happen.
In this case, Mr. Walker had every reason to think that the person bashing down his door after midnight was a criminal intent to do him harm, and not the police, if he didn't hear them say police. And I think it's reasonable to assume that a person who's ready for bed doesn't hear, hasn't heard that. And that's why the knock and announce requirement exists, by the way, is to prevent this kind of thing. And that's for daylight searches. That's for searches that happen at 3 p.m., not searches that happen after midnight.
All right. Apparently they opened the door and this guy was in a firing stance.
They battered the door down with a battering ram is what they did. And he thought that somebody was invading his apartment. That wasn't the police. Certainly. Then that's why he shot them. I think that this is part of the problem is that the protesters lack the capacity for nuance here. It's possible that both Mr. Walker's shots and the police officer, not Mr. Hankinson, whose shots were not reasonable, to be sure, but that both Mr. Walker's shots were reasonable and police officer Cosgrove's and police officer Mattingly's shots, returning fire, were also reasonable. The tragedy of the situation is the warrant service as it happened, as I see it.
I personally think that these people were up to no good. Otherwise, I don't think the police would be knocking or not knocking, no matter what time of day. And therein lies the problem. The conservative 5 funnies. Let's face it, 2020 has been one tough year, which is why we thought the conservative 5 funnies would be a nice respite for us all. EverydayLibertyNation.com posts a conservative meme of the day, and it's invariably one of the most viewed pages of our site. Well, everyone's got their favorite clip, meme, or loony leftist moment of the week. With all that's happened this year, it seems that some humor is in order. Let's begin with LN's master of satire, Graham Noble. So what have you got for us this week, Graham?
Well, Lisa, I picked out a clip of a Joe Biden gaff, a misspeak on his part, a faux pas,
Okay,
perhaps.
let's watch it.
Are you ready? I believe we are. This is a great nation. We're a good and decent people. For the Lord's sake, this is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been able to accomplish when we've done it together.
All right, Graham.
Well, of course, it's difficult when we're talking about the gaffes and or inappropriate comments from Mr. Joe Biden. There are so many of them to choose from. In fact, I was doing a little calculation just the other day that if I had just 1 single cent for every gaffe or inappropriate comment that Mr. Biden has made this year, I would have enough money to purchase a copy of Hillary Clinton's book, and possibly with enough money left over to, I don't know, buy another copy of Hillary Clinton's book, which is an interesting synchronicity there, because Hillary Clinton's book, of course, was called What Happened. And if Joe Biden wrote his memoir today, he could call it What's Happening, perhaps with a question mark at the end of it. But anyway, this particular clip I found was interesting because you can interpret it in a couple of different ways. One of them is, was it simply a slip of the tongue? That seems most obvious. But at the same time, he could have actually been, in a moment of brutal honesty, he could have been talking about the accomplishments of his own party, or indeed he could have been...
Whoa. Okay.
Or indeed he could have been just setting the bar even lower for his expected upcoming presidency. If he convinces us all that up until now America has accomplished absolutely nothing, then when he's in the White House, if he gets to the White House, he just has to accomplish one thing, and it's a victory.
I think it's what you would call a Freudian slip of one kind or another. Something deeper than simply another garden variety Biden gaff.
All right, Scott, set us up for your clip.
Well, I think it's a bit of refreshing, just a tiny taste of a refreshing clip of the two great lions of the Supreme Court, probably of my lifetime so far, which is Scalia on the right and Ginsburg on the left.
Okay, here we go.
You know, what's not to like? Except her views of the law, of course.
Well, they were great friends. I mean, everybody has said that over and over, and it's kind of a beautiful thing.
I think it is, especially today when it seems like so many people can't disagree without being disagreeable, that Scalia and Ginsburg disagreed so vehemently on these points of law and yet had a real and true friendship. This was not a political friendship. They were actual friends.
It reminds me a little bit of the Gipper, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, who were political enemies, and they used to bend the elbow together at the end of the day and tell jokes and wax Irish and that sort of thing.
All righty, Joe.
Really nothing to set up. If you show the picture, that speaks 1,000 words. So I say, let's just go right to the picture.
All right, why'd you pick that as your funny clip for the...
I saw that on a tweet, and the guy who tweeted it was using it as a Democrats say that Trump supporters are a cult, and this is also Democrats. So he went that angle. But my caption for that photo would be, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, and here comes the big box media to cover the breaking news. You know, that's just all of them rushing to frame the story just like that.
Scott, where's your jabot?
It's right here, Lisa. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Come on, put it on. Let's
I tried to just on the break while that image was being showed, but I'm a man, and these little clasps are not. I'm not used to them, and I couldn't manage it. So there you go.
At least put it up. Very nice.
It reminds me of the Washington Post that after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, they ran a linked line in their story saying live updates on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death.
I know.
She's as Graham said, ooh, she's dying. No, maybe she isn't. Ooh, maybe she is. Ooh, she's dead again. Or maybe she's not.
All right, Tim, what do you got for us this week?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take Graham's meme and raise him one, because I think I got a Biden clip that's even more memorable than him. What he said in Graham's clip, and this came very recently in a speech this week. And now let me note before you play it that Joe Biden was on a teleprompter when he said this, discussing the death toll of COVID-19.
Most cruelly of all, if Donald Trump has his way, the complications from COVID-19, which are well beyond what they should be. It's estimated that 200 million people have died, probably by the time I finish this talk.
Well, for that to happen, about, let's see, 197 million people would have to have died. I think it's possible that Biden was hoping by exaggerating like that people might really somehow believe it, and it would seem even worse than it was. And I will say this, if the death toll really was 200 million, Biden might have a shot in this election.
The funny thing for me was that he didn't catch his mistake.
On a teleprompter.
And that's a lot of zeros, They're confusing.
Well, I think it's interesting because how many of us picked a Biden clip?
I think it was 2, but it could have been all 5 easily.
All right. Well, this one cracked me up. Check this out.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. One nation, indivisible, under God, for real.
He didn't pledge allegiance to the flag. He pledged allegiance to the United States of America. For real. I mean, my son was in the other room. He couldn't see who was on, and he said, Mom, who's that man that doesn't know the Pledge of Allegiance?
It is troubling that that's the second time he's made a mistake attempting to recite the Pledge of Allegiance or attempting to recite a pivotal clause from one of the founding documents. I think he really has, that it's a bit of an issue for me.
And that's it for the Funnies this week. Joe, final thoughts?
Final thoughts is we'll go back to the first thought. I just really believe the circus that is going to come up with this Supreme Court nominee is going to hurt Joe Biden in an especially hard way. We haven't brought up that Kamala Harris is going to be in the spotlight once again on the Judiciary Committee for this thing. She wilts every time she's in that spotlight. When she was declared the front runner briefly in the Democratic primary, she froze like a deer in the headlights. When she had her big moment with Kavanaugh and his Supreme Court nomination, she came across as incoherently bullying, trying to just nail him down on things that weren't even important. So I just, again, would say that Joe Biden doesn't want any part of what's coming, and it's coming.
Scott, final thoughts?
The legacy of the drug war is what has caused so much of these incidents that are now a festering boil on the body of America. And if we don't lance it quick, we're going to be in trouble. And just like Joe said earlier tonight, making this about race is not only false, but it'll lead to the destruction of the movement for change. Real change between how the police and the policed, the relationship between them. And we need it.
Tim.
40 versus 4. You put a Supreme Court justice, a young Supreme Court justice on who's a conservative to replace the most left-wing progressive on the court. You create a 6-3 constitutionalist majority on the court for a generation or more. That's a victory that is such a gift to Republicans that they can honestly feel, and I think most Republicans believe that Trump is going to win. But even if he doesn't, this appointment to the court will last for 40 years, as opposed to 4 more years of the Trump administration. So go ahead and compare the impact of a new conservative on the court and a changed majority, or a changed entire direction of the court, versus a second term of Donald Trump. And I think you'll conclude that you could have an argument about which would be more important to people that like both.
All right, Graham, the next to last final word.
Well, I would say that my closing thought here would be that we should all consider just holding on tight and battening down the hatches. People like to, in an election year, like to talk about an October surprise. I believe there's going to be more than one October surprises. I think there's going to be a November surprise, a December surprise, probably a January surprise, and a February surprise. I think no matter who wins this election, things are going to be crazy for at least about the next 6 to 7 months before gradually some level of sanity starts to set in. And I hate that to sound all doom and gloom, but I just think, anything could happen between now and next February or March or April of next year.
All right, so Graham's got the final word of democracy dies in darkness. And that's it for the Conservative 5. Thanks for tuning in. And remember to check out libertynation.com. Subscribe to our popular conservative daily news briefing. Join our new Roku channel. And now we have a Rumble page where this program can be seen along with all our other TV shows. And remember, liberty all the time and everywhere.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Election 2020 Big Bottom Flash Reports are coming. On election night, at the bottom of every hour, LibertyNation.com will give you Election Night 2020, 90 seconds at a time, with our Big Bottom Flash Reports. You'll get the drop with our one-stop shop. We'll shed the light on Fight Night. Tune into LibertyNation.com on election night for our Big Bottom Flash Reports at the bottom of every hour. 90 glorious seconds for everything you need to know without the spin.